It's a pleasure to be here at Eva and talk about something I've been doing for a few years. This was originally going to be a talk. I submitted this for Eva 2020, and then the COVID lockdown happened and everything went on hold. But 2020 was the 850th anniversary of the murder of Thomas Becket in Canterbury Cathedral. And this was an event that shocked the whole of Europe. It was the culmination of a power struggle between the church and the state, between Becket and King Henry II. And Becket was cut down at the altar in Canterbury Cathedral by 4 knights who'd come from the king in France. He was quickly canonized, made a saint, and a lavish shrine constructed in the Trinity Chapel at the cathedral, which then brought hundreds of thousands of pilgrims from all over Europe for the next 350 years until Henry VIII unsainted Thomas and the shrine was demolished. And this murder of Becket became literally iconic. It was depicted widely in all forms of media and was deeply embedded in the cultural fabric of Europe. Now, I live in Stratford-upon-Avon, generally known as the home of Shakespeare, but Stratford has lots of other interesting heritage, not least the Guild Chapel, which is part of a collection of guild buildings which survive to this day. It's a most wonderful architectural assembly. They were all originally timber-framed buildings, but the chapel nave and tower were rebuilt in stone in perpendicular style around 1500. The guild was dissolved by order of King Edward VI in 1548, but very fortuitously, the buildings came back into the ownership of the town, and they've been preserved ever since. And so they've survived really remarkably. When the nave of the Guild Chapel was rebuilt, all of the interior walls, the ceiling and all of the walls were painted with designs of medieval iconography. These formed what we might call the Biblia Pauperum, or Poor Man's Bible. So they were very graphical, simplified almost to the point of cartoons. The purpose of these was for devotion rather than decoration. They were aids to teaching and contemplation, encouraging people who were there to prepare themselves for death and judgment. On the west wall of the nave, there are 2 large wall paintings. The organ is very new, so disregard that. But on either side of the arch, on the left was a painting of the murder of Becket, and on the right, a painting of St. George killing the dragon. The walls were not plastered, but they were simple base coat of stone-colored primer was applied, onto which the colored paintings were made. They've been damaged very badly, especially in the 19th century, by trying to turn the building into a Protestant chapel. And there was a wooden gallery across the back which cut right through these paintings. But faint traces still remain of a wall painting with the Becket murder. If that's all we had today, we wouldn't know much about it. But The paintings were covered up by lime wash after the Reformation. And they were rediscovered in 1804. And an antiquarian from London was called to come and look at them. And he published a set of detailed drawings on lithographic plates. I actually have a set of these to show you. This is very rare. There are only a few sets of these in existence. I'll leave them out here so you can look at them later. This is the painting of the lithograph, I should say, of the murder of Becket. And this was published in 1807. It's in about 6 color separations, and each one was hand drawn on stone and printed in register with the others. And so it's a bit like silk screening, I suppose. So each color is a single ink that appears within the dark outline. And this, you see in this a very good representation of what was there on the wall. At least it's the rendering of Thomas Fisher of what he saw. Now, a previous project by Kate Giles from the Archaeology Department in York created a virtual reality simulation of the Guild Chapel interior, and she mapped these drawings onto surfaces of a 3D model. This was viewed through a headset, and you could physically walk up and down the aisle, the center of the nave in the building, and the viewpoint would change according to which way you were facing and how close you were to the walls. And that gave quite an interesting immersive impression of how the decorated building may have looked when it was first painted around 1500. But it was really rather crude. It was unmistakably a computer graphic model with no control over especially over the illumination. And so it seemed to me that there was a good opportunity here for projecting a picture onto the wall, and specifically projecting the Fisher drawing on top of the traces of the wall painting in register with what's there. This is augmented reality in a heritage context. So what could be easier than that? Just put up the projector, put an image on the wall, and you've done it. Well, that's true, but the practicalities of doing those things are actually, I found out, quite difficult. And so the rest of this talk, I'm going to take you through 5 different aspects. I was able to do all of this, these things I happen to have lying around at home. I hasten to add, I didn't have to buy any extra equipment for this. I had it all. So the first thing was the actual lithograph. This priceless lithograph. I have an A3 scanner at home, so I could, because these are not found, it's a flat sheet, so I could place it onto the scanner and digitize it at 600 dot per inch. And the image area is cropped out to size of around 5,500 by 7,400 pixels. Quite a good big image. 117 megabytes is a TIFF file. This is in the native color space of the scanner, the RGB generated by the scanner. I selected a gamma of 1.8. I didn't use sRGB. sRGB was introduced really for mobile phones and portable imaging devices. And it has a gamma of about 2.2, which is higher than I like. And it raises the black level quite a lot. There's a big black offset to account for flare lighting in typical viewing environments. Requirements for a projector. I wanted a standard presentation type, not a big expensive cinema style projector, but something with a high luminance and contrast, high spatial resolution, and separate RGB modulators rather than a spinning color wheel in front of a single modulator. What I chose, this is in 2020, was typical good quality projector for a conference presentation room, exactly what you might use in this setting in any studio or university room. So this has a light output of 3,400 lumens, HD resolution, and 3 modulators. And it's compact, it's only sort of briefcase size. Now, the painting is in portrait format. So to get best use of the pixels in the projector dictates that it was turned vertically, so that the longer dimension in the projector matches the aspect of the picture. So I screwed a 6mm aluminium plate onto the standard mounting holes on the projector base, attached that to an aluminium channel, length 50 centimeters, and then clamped that onto the top section of a telescopic aluminium mast with a tripod base. These are the, this is a drawing of the elevation of the setup in the chapel. The painting is about 2.7 meters in height by 2 meters in width, but its baseline is up nearly 3 meters above the floor. So it's considerably higher than this ceiling up to the bottom of the picture. And so the projector needs to be raised up to about 4.5 meters, something like that, the center of projection. That's about 14 feet above the floor level of the chapel. And 14 feet is a reasonable height to raise something that weighs 5 kilograms. And I used, sorry, tell you in a minute, this mast is something that I previously used for raising a camera rig up for photogrammetric survey of the ceiling at Hampton Court Palace. I presented this twice in the past at the EVA conference in 2012, I think, in 2014. That work on the decorated ceiling at Hampton Court. Now, once you've got the image on the wall, how do you register the projected image with the physical wall, the traces on the wall? And because every time you place the mast and erect it, the projector is going to be in a slightly different place. So you can't predict where it's going to be. It has to be an interactive procedure in order to get it right. And I figured out that a geometric projective transform would enable me to do this. And so I'm mapping every pixel on the display back to the source image using this transform, which maintains straight lines are straight, but not necessarily parallel. So it's a trapezoidal. It's controlled in software entirely by the coordinates of the 4 corner points of this quadrilateral. And I programmed all this in MATLAB using keyboard commands on my laptop computer to select and move the corner points around. So they can be moved individually to distort the figure. It can be translated, rotated, slanted, and so on, various geometric functions to get it into place. Well, here it is in operation. Hope you can see there's the mast raised up. It's in 5 sections. There's the projector about 14 feet up from the floor, projecting onto the wall. And it's more or less in register with the painting. This has been adjusted manually in luminance and color so that it looks like a real painting under the prevailing illumination. And that's the key, under the prevailing illumination. Here's a close-up of the center of the image. You can see that some of it, the sword is very close to the trace on the wall. But other parts, the top of the altar, it's reredos on the altar. That's the projected image, and this is the painted image. So there's a disparity between those. And down on the altar, here is Thomas's head, just the top of his head being cut off here. And you see the chalice, projected chalice and the painted chalice on the altar. But Thomas Fisher wasn't making a facsimile, wasn't taking a photograph of what was on the wall. He was making a drawing of it, possibly even done later from memory. And so maybe this can never be exactly registered except by some kind of rubber sheet distortion. Now, what about ambient light? It's difficult because if you have a constant intensity of projection, it's going to be too bright when you're in dim conditions, too dark, indistinct when you're in bright conditions. This was shown at a recent project around 2020 in St. Albans Abbey, where they got a lot of money from the National Lottery and spent it on 4 super projectors, which went up in the Triforium Gallery and produced these huge projections onto the pillars in the nave. But there was no control here over the image brightness, so they're always as bright as this, and it's completely overwhelming when there's not much daylight. In the Guild Chapel, the ambient illumination inside the building is a combination of 3 components. There's the direct daylight coming in through 8 large lantern windows, 4 on the south side and 4 on the north side. There's also diffusely reflected light from the walls, ceiling, and the furniture. And then there's also light emitted by pew lamps and cornice uplighters. The daylight is changing all the time. And time of year, the weather conditions, the time of day, etc., etc. So it really needs continuously to measure, mute, and to correct the projections to maintain it somehow as it would look if it were a reflective painting on the wall. I was able to position a white card, it's an A2 piece of Fomex board, on the top of a 15-foot light stand alongside the paint, and to measure the light reflected off this with a spectroradiometer. It is making a spot measurement of the spectral power distribution of the light over the visible spectrum. You can see below there a family of graphs measurements at 15-second intervals. So the shape of the spectrum remains constant, but the amplitude is changing all the time. Similarly, I could use the same setup with the white card now in the field of the projector, measure the color primaries. So we have the spectral power distribution of the light output from the red, green, and blue channels, and also from the white all combined. Being an additive device, the white is the sum of the three channels. And from that, I could construct the display profile. So, given all that, here's a flow diagram showing the components I've already described, with a black box in the middle. The black box somehow has to process the image so that first it has the color appearance of the Fisher print, of this print, and that it adapts to the changing illumination in the same way that an actual wall painting would do. And that's a two-stage process. First, to compensate for the ambient illumination, and second, to convert from the scanner's RGB color space to the projector's RGB color space.
So you were running a little bit.
Yes. Right, this is the last slide. So the solutions to be found in colorimetry is actually a science of colorimetry, which underlies the color management we all use in our operating software. And the solution is to compute a set of tri-stimulus values of known color samples under the measured ambient spectrum. I originally thought I could use a color chart like this one, simply the Gretaag-Macbeth color checker DC chart. So it has a lot of color samples. You can measure the spectral reflectance distribution of every sample, and also scan this on my A3 scanner by comparing the stimulus values with the red, green, and blue values. You can use regression to compute a transform from XYZ to RGB, generate a matrix which can then be applied to all of the pixels in the image, in the RGB image. So that's the key to getting this done. In the event, I didn't have this chart, and so I realized I scanned all the pages of the color atlas of the natural color system. It's 40 pages at different hues. You get 1,600 samples. And that enables these processing stages to be implemented. So that this is an automated system. Everything in the dotted line here is pre-calculated. The data sets are known in advance. The interactive flow is taking the measurement of the ambient illumination and then generating this matrix M and recalculating the image in order to project onto the wall. And that process happens once every 20 seconds, approximately. So in conclusion, this augmented reality by projection sounds easy, but there are actually lots of interesting engineering challenges in doing it properly. In particular, the adaptation to ambient light requires both measurement and computation. I shall be demonstrating this in the Guild Chapel in Heritage Week in September. So if you're in Stratford, do come and see it in operation. And I plan to do one or two visual experiments with observers to judge the most realistic color rendering. This is ongoing work.